What's up, everybody? Welcome to The Conversation, a Crosspoint City young adults podcast created to help young adults have conversations about Jesus and what it looks like to follow him. My name is Ansley, and this is Carlos.
We're starting. We're not restarting.
We have the giggles, it seems.
Ansley so we clap before we start the podcast, and she completely missed y'all.
When you have a hard time high-fiving somebody, it's like I did that with myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bad clap.
Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. But let's get started. Thank you guys for joining us. This is a Conversation podcast. I'm Carlos. This is Ansley. And we got a lot to talk about. So,
yeah.
Ansley, start us off.
We are talking today about how we can become better listeners.
Yep.
In your message at the Young Adults Gathering, you explained 5 different practices that we can use as we start to become more like Jesus.
Yeah.
You said you will be more intentional at listening, and that was number 1 on your list. And I was curious, was there a reason for intentionally listening being number 1?
So, no, I just put a list together, and that was the first thing that came to mind. Like, how can I become more like Jesus? Obviously, there's probably a list of things that you would put, but I was thinking personally, I think I need to become a better listener.
Same.
And so, and I think that listening in our culture right now is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't do it. A lot of people want to be heard. A lot of people want to speak, and they're just not really good at listening. And I pulled this quote. It said, most of us, and I was like, I believe listening is hard, but most of us are hard at listening because most of us are distracted, preoccupied, or forget 75% of the time when we should be listening. And so in this little blog I read, it says we hear 125 to 250 words a minute, but we think at 100 words a minute. And so in my head, I was just thinking, like, yeah, we got a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so actually listening requires something of us, right? Like it requires us to put away distractions, to say no to some things, to actually be there in the moment and not to think about other things. And I just think we live in a culture that makes that really, really hard.
Yes.
It makes it very hard for us to really be all there. I remember when I lived with a friend, I was his roommate, and he would be like, dude, let's hang out this weekend. And so it'd be like a Friday night, and I think we were watching the basketball game, and I was just on my phone, just texting or playing a game. I don't know what I was doing. But next thing you know, he looks at me, he's like, bruh, can you be all here?
Wow.
And I could not believe it. Like, yeah, when you're somewhere, you should be all there.
Yeah.
And I just don't think as a culture, like we train each other to do that, or even are trained to do that, because we have so much going on in our life, so much going on in our mind. But then I realized, like, if we want to love people well, if we want to be like Jesus, then we have to be better at listening. And so,
yeah, we're all guilty of that. I mean, I heard recently, I'm trying to think back to where I heard it from, but even having your phone sitting on the table while you're across the table having a discussion with someone shows this is more important than this is.
Yeah.
This conversation is. So I try to put it away as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's good. I think, man, the phone has invaded every moment of our life.
Yeah.
Like we have it everywhere. I actually saw this video on social. I think it was on Instagram, where this guy just asked the question, what would happen if we treated our Bibles like we treated our phones?
Sheesh.
And because think about it, if you leave your phone at home, you're turning that car around.
Yeah.
If you leave the phone somewhere, like you're rushing back, you need it in your life, you carry it everywhere. It's the first thing you do when you wake up. What would happen if you did that with your Bible?
Yeah.
First thing you did in the morning was read it. First thing you did when you left it behind was turn the car around, no matter how far you were, to go get it. You know, like
last thing before you go to bed.
Last thing before you go to bed. When you wake up in the middle of the night. I mean, it would change our
life.
But I know we're talking about listening. But
yeah.
So I was thinking that just to why I thought listening was something that if you become more like Jesus, you would be better at, is because our job as Christians is to make disciple. And discipleship is a really slow process. It is not something that you can manufacture or just like speed people through. Like, it does take some time to sit with people, talk with people. And I think when you listen and you listen well, you get to find out a couple things. You get to find out where people are, what people have been through, and then how to share the gospel with them. And I think that's why people can't share the gospel with people, is because they don't really know how to start. And when they do share, they're not really receptive of it because you didn't even take time to listen to them, you know? And so I wrote a couple things down. It says, we don't listen because when we listen, we get to know where people are at, what people know, and what people also don't know. And I think that helps us in sharing the gospel and being more intentional. And I was just thinking that in seminary, I learned this line, and this was probably 2014, 2015. I had a professor say that your job is to win the person and not the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you're trying to win the person, you care about the person you're across the table from. And so you're going to be more active in your listening. You're going to care about what they're saying. You're looking for opportunities, not just to chime in, but you're looking for opportunities to pray for that person. So you're trying to learn more. And that's where you have to ask good questions. And I said that, like, if you're listening well, then you will have good questions to ask.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the next thing I was going to ask. Just you said that you said in the gathering, you want to become an expert at asking questions. Why do you think this makes someone a good listener?
Man, I say it all the time, that when you ask questions, you're digging in somebody's life.
Yeah.
And you're trying to uncover things, and it's not always bad things. Like, I know a lot of people use questioning to just find some dirt, but that's not what I'm doing. I want to be an expert at asking questions, because I feel like when you ask questions, it's really investing in the other person.
Yeah.
You're asking them, hey, why'd you think like that? Why'd you do that? Or tell me a little bit about your job, or how was your day? And you asking questions, like, I do believe, like, the defenses of a person just start to come down, like their walls slowly come down. And I think that good questions is the fruit of good listening.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to be an expert at it. And also, I wrote down that Jesus asked questions. He said, why do you call me good? Why are you afraid? And then I found out this stat that Jesus asked over 300 questions in the gospel.
Wow.
And so I wrote this down. It says, when we ask questions and listen to people, they feel seen and heard, because think about it. When you're across the table for somebody and maybe you're talking and you've been talking for maybe 5 to 6 minutes, and then they ask a question, and it's not a good question, but it's a question that you've already said in your moment. Like, I've seen that so many times, and I could tell you weren't really listening. I just said that.
Wow.
But if they're asking a question they want me to elaborate on something, or they want to dig in a little bit more on something I said, it makes me feel like they care.
Yeah.
Because when we listen to people, it really is saying that we care about you.
That's good.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, people really just want to be seen and they want to be heard. And we can go days or weeks or months with just being like self-absorbed, or we can try to see the person that's right in front of us.
Yeah. And that's good. And I really do think that's a good place a good foundation to start, and also to share the gospel.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you're willing to listen to somebody for 30 to 45 minutes, you think they're not going to be willing to listen to you for 4 or 5 minutes when you share the gospel with them?
Yes.
Like, it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
So
it builds a trust.
Exactly. I think that listening is a low-key superpower for Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote that it's so easy to move quickly past people. And like I just said, it's easy to focus on ourselves and what we have going on, rather than taking the time to see people around us and see those moments as opportunities. Like you just said, opportunities to share the hope that we have in Jesus.
Yeah. And no, I actually have a story about like how listening and asking questions really helped me out in a platform to share the gospel.
Yes.
When I used to Uber, I picked up a guy, and I'm telling you, man, I was not in a space to want to listen. I was tired and exhausted, and I remember this was my last trip of the night, and I went to go pick up this guy from his job, and he gets in my car. He's really loud, and he keeps asking me like a question. He's like, "Hey, is this your like full-time job?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm an Uber driver. Duh, I'm picking you up." And next thing you know, he's like, "Dude, I know this is not your full-time job." I was like, "Dude, this is my full-time job." And sometimes I don't tell people that I'm a pastor, or at that time I was a student pastor. And I don't tell a lot of people that like right off the jump, because they get like really reserved and they don't really tell me their story or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I always hold off. But then this guy, I was like, "You know what? This is my last trip. Dude, I work at a church. I'm a youth pastor." And he's like, "Really?" And he's like, I'm like, "Yeah, really?" He's like, "Well, I'm a Satanist." And I was like, "What the?"
Wow.
Okay. This guy's tripping. And in my head, everything slows down. And at first, I'm not going to lie, I thought I was going to die. But I thought this guy was going to do something, and it was just going to be weird.
That's scary.
But then the next thing that kind of came into my mind, I was like, this is so interesting that this guy has a completely different worldview than me. He believes in something so much different than me. And then I thought, this is an opportunity for me to win him over for Jesus.
Wow.
And that all happened in like 2 to 3 seconds. And then the next thing that came out of my mouth was, "Oh, really? Tell me about that."
Wow.
And for the next 20 minutes, this guy begins to tell me about his faith in Satanism. And he tells me about everything you could think about. And I'm just blown away. And I keep asking questions. So I was like, "Really? You guys got your own book, and you got this, and you got that." And as he was talking, I felt the Spirit of God tell me, win the person and not the conversation. He was wrong in pretty much everything he was saying.
Yeah.
And his faith was going to lead him to a place he didn't want to go. But as I was listening to him, I could hear in his voice that he wasn't even sure that this was the thing. And so I kept asking questions, and the questions allowed him to speak more. And I pretty much ended up asking him, like, "Hey, how'd you get here?" And then he told me, and it still breaks me down to this day. He says, "I used to be a Christian, but I just think following Jesus was just way too hard, or Jesus was way too harsh." And in my head, I was like, "Bro, I don't think you know Jesus. At least you don't know the Jesus that I've read in the pages of the Bible.
Yeah.
Because the person that you're explaining or detailing isn't the king that I know."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." Because even like, and I just shared Bible verse after Bible verse, but I don't think that would have happened if I would have just started talking. Like, I really had to sit there and just listen and ask questions. And then through my questions, I saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
And then he got to share his struggle with church and church hurt and all this stuff. And then that was able for me to kind of correct some thinking. And by the end of the ride, this guy's in my car, and we're sitting in front of his apartment, and we've been talking for like 30, 40 minutes.
I was about to
already
ask.
arrived at his spot. And he looks at me and he says, "Dude, you're different." And I was like, that is the best compliment you could ever get.
Yeah, you reflected Jesus to him that day.
And I remember giving him my number, and he ends up texting me like the next couple days, and then we just stopped talking. But it was just cool that I was able to plant that seed.
Yes, you
and
were.
it started with just listening. Like, it's that easy. You want to be able to share the gospel, listen, ask good questions, and then be prepared to give an answer to your faith, for your faith. And so, yeah.
That's so good. That is so good. It takes, the thing that keeps coming to my mind is like listening well takes patience.
Yeah.
And, Jesus never saw people as inconveniences. It reminds me of the story in Mark 10, 13 through 14. People brought their small children to Jesus so he could lay hands on them and bless them. But the disciples told people to stop bringing their children to him. And Jesus, when he saw this, he didn't want... He told them, "Let the children come to me. Don't stop them, because God's kingdom belongs to people who are like these little children." So just seeing people and seeing the opportunity to share the Lord with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could have saw that guy as an inconvenience that day, but you saw it as an opportunity.
Yeah, well, I could have saw him as a person that was was just a waste of my time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so glad that you said that Jesus didn't see people as inconveniences.
Yeah.
And I feel like we do that a lot. Like, oh, that dude's not worth my time, or he's just a waste of time. And it's just crazy. Jesus didn't have that mindset. I was reading today in Mark 5, just thinking through Jairus came to Jesus asking him to come see his daughter. And on the way there, this woman touches his robe and is healed by him. And then he stops to just talk to her.
Yeah.
You know, and I just think that we are so busy that could we have that margin in our schedule? I was literally in a pastor's ministers meeting, and our pastor, Pastor James, said that make sure you have margins for things like that.
Yeah.
So that we can stop and actually be with people. And I just believe if you're a Christian, man, you're supposed to be with people. Like your goal is to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and then teaching them the ways of Jesus. Like that doesn't happen at a distance. That happens in close quarters.
Yeah.
You know? And so I just believe that we have to be intentional. And the way you get a disciple, like if you get somebody that the way you find people is by you sitting at a table with them, having a meal with them, listening to them, and then sharing the hope that you have with them.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think the street preachers do that well. I know they're screaming and they're proclaiming and they're being bold or whatever, but I just don't see it to be very fruitful because God is calling you to sit down and to talk with them.
Yeah.
And you're always just trying to be right that, and this might sound really cocky, I know that our faith is right. I know that Christianity is right. I know it's right. I don't have to prove to you it's right. I'm going to show you it's right. And by the way I love you, by the way I listen to you, by the way I share with you, by the way I walk with you. And I think that has shown more fruit to me than just screaming at people.
It's about a relationship with those people.
Yeah.
I love that you said build in margin. Like these things matter than anything else we make ourselves busy with. We can go a long time with just missing people. Yeah, but that's good.
No, I agree. I think that, I mean, this sucks. Like even people that are probably listening, like people have missed them. You know, that and they're the Christians in their life. They haven't slowed down and they haven't stopped. And some people out there just want you to take some time and just to listen to them. And man, I just think about the people who do feel lonely and do not feel loved and do not feel cared for. It's probably because no one's listening to them.
Wow.
I wish, I know I haven't been perfect in this, and man, I do wish that I would have listened or just sat down across the table from people and been a better listener. And so if anybody's listening and they don't feel cared or loved for, just know that God bends his ear to hear our prayers, you know, and that he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. I mean, he is the creator of the universe. The earth is his footstool, and he will stop whatever he's doing to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know, because he cares about you and he loves you. And so, man, we got to be people like that.
That is so good. And that transitions perfectly. And what I was about to ask, when we listen well to others, how does it reflect the heart of God towards us?
I mean, I really do think that listening shows that you care for people.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, think about it, Ansley. When people stop what they're doing and they just sit there and listen to, I'm not going to say, you know, if you're complaining, but you're venting, you know? Don't you feel cared for? Don't you feel loved? That the fact that you just stopped everything to hear me out? I just think that shows our God, you know, like the fact that God became flesh, and then Jesus actually did this. Like I think of the woman at the well. I think of Mark 3 when Jesus sat with sinners, or was it Mark 2 when he sat with these people and actually talked to them. I love the fact in John 2, or it's John 2 or at the end of John 2, beginning of John 3, when Jesus and Nicodemus are sitting down and they're having a conversation. You know, Jesus was really, really good at listening. Yeah. And we do care for people. We care for people well when we take time to listen to them.
Yeah, because he listens to us.
Yeah.
Psalm 116 verse 2 says, because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. So because the Lord listens to us and cares for us in that way, we get to do that for other people.
Yeah. It's crazy that God listens because he cares, and we should listen because we care. And then you have to ask this question: if you don't listen, do you care?
Or are you caring for the wrong things? Are we
really
worried about the wrong things and caught up in the wrong pursuits rather than relentlessly pursuing those far from God to help them know and follow Jesus?
Yeah, no, that's good. So I guess we can wrap it up like this. If you want to be a good listener, just care about the person in front of you. Ask good questions. Keep digging, because what you're really digging for is great opportunities to share the gospel, to share the hope that you have, and just care about that person. Invest in them with good listening.
Yeah.
And active listening.
And I would add something I'm convicted with is I need to make time for it.
Yeah.
I need to schedule out time to.
Yeah, and put the phone away.
Yes. So good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that being said, that is our conversation. We will see you guys next episode.
Peace.